Most people think karma takes years. Sometimes it takes seconds. The air inside the supermarket was heavy with the scent of overripe bananas and fluorescent fatigue. Mothers pulled coupons from crumpled pockets. Employees swept invisible dust across linoleum floors. The world spun as it always did, quietly, wearily, unaware that a moment was coming, sharp as broken glass. At Register 4, a woman stood with a child on her hip and desperation in her eyes. Her name was Elena, though no one there bothered to ask. Her son, Micah, was 4 years old and hungry, clutching a dented box of cereal like it was treasure. Her cart was modest: milk, bread, some fruit bruised enough to be on sale. She placed items slowly on the conveyor belt, counting in her head like every number cost her something, because it did. Behind her, a man in a tailored shirt and expensive watch huffed loudly. His name was Darren. He was a man who believed the world owed him efficiency, a man who measured time in dollars and people in usefulness. And to him, Elena was a delay, a smudge on his perfect afternoon. Elena's card was declined once, then again. She fumbled, apologizing in the quiet panic of someone used to this kind of humiliation. Her cheeks flushed, and her son tugged at her sleeve, asking if they could still get the cereal. The clerk said nothing, just waited, blank-faced. And that's when Darren spoke. Maybe if you spent less time popping out kids and more time working, you could afford groceries like the rest of us. It hit the air like a slap. People heard and said nothing, because cruelty, when dressed in confidence, often walks freely in public. Elena froze, her lips parted, not in defense, but in disbelief. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were rehearsed, the same old script women like her had heard for years. But karma, unlike cruelty, doesn't need applause. Darren turned, self-satisfied, smirking to himself as if he'd scored some invisible point in a game only he was playing. He took a step to leave, and that's when it happened. His foot slid, not on water, not on ice, but on a grape, a single squished grape that had fallen from the same bundle Elena had tried to buy. And in one instant, the man who stood tall above her was horizontal, crashing to the floor with a sickening slap of skin against tile and ego against reality. The silence shattered, gasps, a stifled laugh, the sound of something sacred unfolding. Darren groaned, dazed, blinking up at the flickering lights as if the universe itself had betrayed him. The clerk, suddenly reanimated, rushed to help. A manager appeared from nowhere, but no one saw Elena move, not right away. She gently picked up the cereal box, held Micah closer, and turned to the cashier. "Take the grapes off," she said softly. "I'll pay for the rest." And this time, the card went through. No more drama, no more spectacle. As she walked past the man who had mocked her, now crumpled and bruised on the floor, she didn't gloat. She didn't stare. She didn't need to, because sometimes the universe replies in a whisper that roars louder than revenge. You see, karma doesn't dress like lightning or scream like thunder. It comes as a grape underfoot, as silence in a room full of people, as a child still clutching cereal in a mother's arms as she walks tall and quiet, past the echo of someone else's collapse. And here's the truth no one likes to hear. Those who climb ladders on the backs of others eventually slip on the smallest things. Not because they are cursed, but because they are blind. You can learn a lot in those moments, if you're paying attention. But the question is, who's watching and who's listening? Darren sat on the cold tile floor, the shine of authority stripped from his face, replaced with something raw: confusion, embarrassment, pain. He wasn't seriously injured, not in body, but his pride lay cracked wide open. His tailored shirt clung to his side, damp from the floor cleaner. The watch on his wrist ticked loudly in the silence between voices. For the first time in years, he wasn't the loudest man in the room. A few bystanders helped him to his feet. One, an older woman with silver hair and no tolerance for theatrics, muttered under her breath, "About time." She hadn't spoken up earlier, but karma had, and she seemed content with the delivery. The manager insisted on filing a report, just in case. Darren waved him off, humiliated and burning. But what stung more than the bruised hip or twisted ankle was the look on the face of the boy. That child, clinging to his mother, had looked at him not with fear, but with something deeper, disappointment, as if even a child could see how small he'd become. Darren limped out of the store with no groceries and no victory. Outside, the sun glared down like judgment. He sat in his luxury car and stared at the steering wheel. The leather was smooth and untouched, yet he felt filthy. For a moment, he wanted to scream, at the grape, the floor, the world, but beneath the noise building inside him, another feeling crept in. Shame. Real and sharp, the kind that doesn't go away with excuses or status. It followed him home. Darren lived alone in a condo that looked like a showroom, spotless, staged, and utterly lifeless. No photos, no warmth, just curated silence and designer emptiness. He poured himself a drink, but the taste was bitter. Not from the liquor, but from something he hadn't tasted in years. Consequence. He replayed the scene, her eyes, the child's question, his own words, ugly, cruel, rehearsed. It wasn't the first time he'd spoken like that. It was a script he'd perfected over time, shaped by ego, sharpened by detachment. He had mocked, dismissed, belittled, and it had never cost him anything. Until it did, and it had only taken one step. You see, arrogance has a way of insulating you. It builds walls that echo your opinions and drown out reality. It tells you that you're justified, that others are weak, that cruelty is just efficiency in motion. But when those walls crack, even slightly, the truth floods in like water, cold and relentless. That night, Darren couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, the ibuprofen dulled that, but because his mind wouldn't stop whispering things he didn't want to hear. Why did you say that? Who have you become? And why does a child's silence hurt more than your own shame? Meanwhile, in a different part of town, Elena sat on the edge of her worn-out couch, arms wrapped around Micah as he slept, his cheek pressed against her chest. The apartment was still, the kind of stillness that holds both exhaustion and peace. She thought about the man, not with vengeance, but with weary reflection. That moment at the store wasn't new to her, just louder than usual. She had been treated like an inconvenience so many times that her defenses had grown calloused. But something was different this time. The way he fell. The way he looked up, stunned. Like a mask had been ripped away and he'd glimpsed his real face for the first time. She didn't believe in curses, or magic, or cosmic scales. But she did believe in moments. Pivotal, crystalline moments where life speaks in symbols instead of words. And that grape, tiny, squashed, unnoticed, had become an instrument of justice. Not because it humiliated him, but because it revealed him. People think karma is about punishment, but often it's about clarity. For Darren, clarity had arrived not like thunder, but like a whisper from the floor beneath him. And the question was, would he listen? He didn't return to the grocery store that week, or the next. But something in him, the part long buried beneath titles, deadlines, and designer labels, began to stir. Days passed with a peculiar weight. Food lost its flavor. Conversations felt like static. Darren found himself watching people more than speaking to them, studying the way they held their children's hands, how they smiled through fatigue, how they waited in lines with a patience he had never respected before. He caught himself lingering outside cafes, watching mothers juggle strollers and coffee cups while still managing to calm their toddlers. He noticed now the invisible labor of those he used to ignore. The single mother on the bus, the janitor wiping up spills with the quiet efficiency of someone who knows no one will thank them. For the first time in his life, Darren didn't feel above them. He felt behind. One evening, as a gray sky folded over the city, Darren walked into a small market on the corner, not the one where it happened, but similar enough that his hands trembled as he picked up a shopping basket. He moved slowly, mindfully, and as he waited in line behind a woman fumbling with coins in her wallet, he didn't sigh, he didn't roll his eyes, he simply waited. And something strange happened. The clerk smiled at him. Not the polite, perfunctory smile he was used to, but a real one. Human. Soft around the edges. Maybe they sensed it. That something in Darren had cracked open and let the light touch him again. It wasn't a transformation. Not yet. Change rarely comes in a flash of lightning. It comes in the quiet afterward, in the steady steps you choose to take next. It comes in the apology that never needs to be spoken out loud, because it's written in the way you carry yourself. Somewhere across town, Elena was preparing Micah for bed. He was curled in his favorite blanket, the one with faded stars, and she read from a library book she'd borrowed, a story about kindness, about how the smallest acts ripple outward like drops in still water. Micah asked, "Why was that man so mad, Mommy?" Elena paused, then said softly, "Sometimes people get lost inside themselves, and they forget how to see others." "Will he be okay?" "I think so," she whispered, brushing hair from his brow. "Sometimes falling is how we learn to stand upright." And Darren, somewhere between who he had been and who he might become, stood in front of his mirror. No tailored mask, no practiced scowl. Just a man staring at his reflection, wondering if it was too late to start again. It wasn't. Because karma doesn't only come to punish. It comes to awaken. It comes not just for revenge, but for redemption. To shatter the illusion, so the truth can finally breathe. And in that breath, maybe, just maybe, a better version of you is waiting. Karma doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives when it's time.